Sorry, I started the recording and I wasn't actually ready. Okay, so I'm just going to do a few logical reasoning questions. I'm going to try to kind of keep it to non-argument based questions. So where the stimulus actually isn't an argument. So, I mean, very quickly we can discern that by just looking at the question stem, right? So, sorry, I think I'm a little bit tired right now, so I might not, I might be a bit slower than usual. Okay, so here we have an argument. We are trying to figure out what the purpose is of the statement within the argument. So this is an argument structure rather than like a critical analysis of an argument. Okay, but we'll keep going. Here we've got, we're trying to justify, we're trying to justify something. Okay, and so that would mean that we're dealing with an argument, which one the following, if true, is the strongest logical counter. Okay, so we're countering something, argument. So you can see that most of the stimuli on the logical reasoning section are arguments, like there are argument-based questions. Here we have reasoning. So again, it's going to be argument-based. The principle illustrated above. So this one, like I would assume that it's going to be an argument, and then as soon as I see due to, so that would be an indication that we have a supporting statement. So if we have a supporting statement and we have a supported statement, we have an argument, right? That's essentially the two components that you need for an argument. Okay, argument. Each of the following, if true, contributes to an explanation of the difference in marathon performances described above, except. So this is a paradox question or a resolve, reconcile, explain type of question. But we do have like just two facts here that are kind of, require some sort of explanation, right? Like it's not understood how these two work together. So yeah, this isn't really an argument. Like we wouldn't be able to find a conclusion here. So let's start with this one. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, I guess I am tired. Sorry, so you'll have to bear with me. Okay, so although marathons are 26.2 miles or 42.2 kilometers long, and take even world-class marathoners over 2 hours to run. Okay, athletes who train by running 90 minutes a day fare better in marathons than do those who train by running 120 minutes or more a day. So this is kind of just explaining how training for short periods of time per day tends to actually give you like a better performance on, I guess, your actual marathon day. So yeah, yeah, we have athletes versus those athletes who do this, and those, so it's referencing athletes again. So the only difference here is the amount of time per day. So yeah, let's try to find something that would explain why running less per day actually makes you do better. And when we find those explanations, we're going to eliminate them because we're looking for the exception. So The longer the period of time that one runs daily, the greater the chances of suffering adverse effects due to air pollution. So that would be a pro for running shorter periods per day. So that would help explain. So we can eliminate that. The longer the period of time that one runs daily, the easier it is to adjust to different race lengths. This wouldn't help explain what's going on here, right? So that would be a pro for running longer per day. Longer, more frequent injuries. Okay, so that's out. If you train for over, you grow bored, less motivated. That one also would help explain the difference. Runners who train over 90 minutes per day deplete and have less energy. Okay, so I'm just gonna add a little text here. So why, so the explanation, the thing we're trying to explain is why is 90 minutes per day better than 120 per day? So we could have a pro for 90 minutes or a con for 120 minutes. And either of those would help explain. Whereas here, this is a pro for 120 minutes, right? A pro for a longer period of time. Okay. Alrighty. So I will do like show answer for all of these just so you guys can get that confirmation. You don't have to just, you know, take my word for it. And also, sometimes I do get them wrong. So let's, yeah, make sure I don't get too, too overconfident there. All right. Argument based. So we'll skip this one. Oh, the statements above. Okay. And this is a most strongly support question stem. I think this might actually be one of the question types that I find more challenging personally, because it is an inference question. Sorry, I'm really yawning a lot today. So it is an inference question. So we're trying to infer the correct answer from the information that we're given, but it's not a must be true question. So we may not be able to 100% prove the answer choice using the information that we get. So there might still be almost like a flaw or an assumption that kind of sneaks in there. And so we just have to pick the best answer, the one that's most supported, even if it's not 100% perfectly supported. So I do find that to be challenging personally. Like it adds, you know, I don't know that it does necessarily add subjectivity. Like we should still be able to figure out what the best one is, and that may not be like that. You know, that should be quite clear which is the best one if we're doing our analysis correctly. But yeah, for some reason it doesn't click for me quite in the same way that a must be true would typically. So just keep that in mind, that most strongly support is a little bit different from a strict must be true. Okay. Gene splicing can give rise to new varieties of farm animals that have only a partially understood genetic makeup. Okay. In addition to introducing the genes for whichever trait is desired, the technique can introduce genes governing the production of toxins or carcinogens, and these latter undesirable traits might not be easily discoverable. Okay. What can be most strongly supported? A, all toxin production is genetically controlled. Certainly not supported, right? So that's a very strong, very extreme statement. And we are only really learning about how this particular technique can possibly introduce genes that would govern production of toxins. There's no way that we could make a grand statement about toxin production generally, right? Just knowing that like there are some genes that would produce toxins isn't nearly enough. So that's definitely not going to be the one that's most strongly supported. B, gene splicing to produce new varieties of farm animals should be used cautiously. I would be really suspicious of the word should here. So in order to support that, we would have to have some kind of like principle about what is good or bad. And we don't have any of that. We just have a lot of things that are possible. Now, excuse me, oh, sorry. So we do have desirable and undesirable in terms of traits. So, I mean, that I suppose is a bit of, what is good and what is bad. And so we might not have a read on like what bad or undesirable traits could potentially crop up later that we wouldn't be able to discover easily. So, I mean, I can understand this one being a bit supported. I think it's more supported than A, right? But yeah, like I said, like that word should, we've got to be careful going from what can happen, what might happen, to what should happen. Those are different questions. C, gene splicing is not effective as a way of producing new varieties of farm animals. Whether it's effective or not isn't really an issue. I mean, we know that it's possible. Yeah, its effectiveness, I think, is it depends, right? I mean, is it desirable versus effective? I think those would be different questions. I think the fact that it's possible to get new varieties of farm animals by gene splicing could on its own mean that it is effective. And so this one actually is like the opposite is actually supported. So I wouldn't choose that. Most is problematic. I don't see anything here that talks about the usual results or the majority of the time. So yeah, I see that it can introduce genes governing the production of carcinogens. Also, like genes that govern the production of toxins or carcinogens. Like, does that mean that it's going to develop cancer or create cancer? And to govern the production of carcinogens, does that mean that those genes are necessarily going to result in like a higher production of carcinogens if they just govern it, if they are in control of toxin production or carcinogen production? Yeah, not not clear there. So yeah, that the most is problematic, but then also just because this can happen where you've got genes that are governing the production of cancer producing things, right? Does that mean they're going to develop cancer? Not necessarily. E, gene splicing will advance. So here we're also looking like into the future, making a prediction. Don't think that we have enough evidence here to make a prediction. And here they're predicting that eventually we will know enough that we'll be able to foresee all of the consequences, or at least that the unforeseen consequences will not be a problem. So yeah, even though I was suspicious of B because of the word should, and yeah, initially I was like, I don't my gut feeling about that type of answer choice isn't great. The fact that we do have desirable and undesirable, so we do have good and bad in a sense, and then we aren't sure what the outcome is going to be. Caution, I think, is like supported. So yeah, I do actually think that B is the most strongly supported here. Like I said, this is not my like best question type. It's probably my worst question type. But that's how I would answer these. And even though it's not, even though it's not my best, I'm still getting the vast majority of this question type correct. I think it takes me a little bit longer. And yeah, if I were going to be, rewriting the LSAT or something, and which I don't, I've already graduated from law school, so that's not a thing. But if I were going to rewrite, and I was like, okay, I want to get perfect 100%. This is actually a question type that I would probably focus on. Yeah, so B is the correct answer. So yeah, because we're looking for the best out of the answer choices that we have, we want to be cautious. There's caution thing again, but we want to be cautious about eliminating something too quickly here. And what might be good is actually going through the answer choices and, okay, looking at A, is A supported at all? Okay, and I would say it's so strong that I could eliminate A immediately. Like I'm so confident that A is incorrect, that the difference between some toxin production being genetically controlled and all being genetically controlled is so vast that really A is just not supported. I have hardly any information that gets me to A. Then B, I can say is better than A. C, I can say is worse than B. So I keep B. So, I compare A versus B. I see B is better. And then with C, D, and E, I'm just looking for, is it better or worse than B? Rather than simply looking at it on its own, must it be true based on the information that I'm getting? Is it more supported than another answer choice? So almost ranking how supported the answer choices are. Yeah. In fact, if I were to rank these ones, so B is the most supported. Oh boy. I don't actually know. I don't know how I would rank them, because they all do something that I think is just like not acceptable, I suppose. And C, the opposite, is kind of supported. So maybe that one's at the very bottom. But yeah, making these predictions about the future, actually, maybe A is the second most supported, even though we only know that some toxin production is or can be genetically controlled. At least that's like a portion of this is supported. But making these predictions about the future, yeah, I don't I don't know about that. I might say B is best, then A, then E, D, C. But yeah, anyways, if you want to let me know what your ranking would be, that would be cool. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving. 13, argument-based, 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 argument. So yeah, like they're pretty much all argument-based. Another most strongly supported. All right. So Lathrism. Never heard of this before. Huh. Lathrism. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but interesting. Okay. So this is a debilitating neurological disorder caused by the consumption of the legume Lathyrus sativus, is widespread among the domestic animals of some countries. Attempts to use rats to study Lathyrusm have generally failed. Rats that ingested this legume did not produce the symptoms associated with the disorder. Okay. So they didn't produce the symptoms. Right. Interesting. So what's most strongly supported? The physiology of rats is radically different from that of domestic animals. Radically different in their physiology. So this one I wouldn't say is very strongly supported. I think this would provide like a decent sort of explanation for why even though the rats ate the legume, they didn't end up producing symptoms of the disorder. So yeah, I don't know that I would be leaning toward that one, but it's at least supported a little bit, so I won't eliminate it immediately. B, the rats did not consume as much as the domestic animals. Attempts to use rats that ingested it didn't produce. I mean, we don't know that they didn't. Again, that would potentially provide an explanation, but I'd say A and B are fairly evenly matched in that both would sort of explain the information, but are they really strongly supported by it? C, not all animal species are equally susceptible to Lathyrusm. I mean, that one actually seems more likely, right? So, yeah, not all are equally susceptible. Would make sense. So, just because the rats ate it didn't mean that they ended up getting it, and so using rats to study it isn't really working because they're a different species from domestic animals. And yeah, I would I like see the language of it as well. Not all is a lot easier to support than more specific language or more extreme language. Most is problematic. We do have it being widespread, but other than that, we don't have any indication of like majority. And even widespread doesn't necessarily mean it's the majority. Yeah, and certainly to say that most of them that can are domestic, we just know that it happens to be widespread among domestic animals in some countries. Yeah. Laboratory conditions aren't conducive to the development of laboratorism, so we can't blame the laboratory conditions necessarily, because we know they just tested it on rats. And so it might not be the fact that they're in a lab, it might just be the species, and I think that's more supported by just the way that it's phrased. So yeah, I would go with C here, and C is the correct answer. If you'd like more in depth on any of these answer choices, let me know. Okay, so here we have information and a discrepancy. So let's try to resolve the discrepancy. This is also a paradox or a resolve, reconcile, or explain question type. So some like test prep companies are going to label this as paradox question, and then others would label it as resolve, reconcile, explain. Right. Yeah, and then others would just say that it's not argument based. Okay. A patient complained of feeling constantly fatigued. It was determined that the patient averaged only 4 to 6 hours of sleep per night. And this was determined to contribute to the patient's condition. Oh, averaged only 4 to 6 hours of sleep per night. And this was determined to contribute to the patient's condition. However, the patient was not advised to sleep more. Or they may be advised to sleep more at night and less during the day. What if rather than sleeping during the night, they end up sleeping during the day as well? And maybe they're advised to stop taking naps and then to have longer spans of sleep during night hours. I don't know. This is just me kind of making that up or trying to prephrase something that would potentially resolve the discrepancy based on like my own life, where it's like, well, probably if you added up my nighttime sleeping and my naps, because I do find myself taking naps now that I have been working from home for so long and spend so much time at home. So yeah, maybe they would advise that it's better if you sleep for a solid period of time at night and not take any naps. Okay. But yeah, not advised to sleep more. Why not? A, the shorter one's sleep time, the easier it is to awaken from sleeping. Okay, so that's a pro for short amount of sleep, but we're talking about a patient here who's complaining of feeling tired, not complaining that they can't wake up easily. B, the first 2 hours of sleep do the most to alleviate fatigue. So having extra hours of sleep isn't necessarily going to improve the fatigue. Okay, so maybe something there. But even though those first 2 hours do the most to alleviate fatigue, so let's say it alleviates like 51% of your fatigue, if we can quantify it that way. What about the other 49%? Some people require less sleep than the 8 hours required by the average person. Okay, sure, but this person is feeling fatigued, and the only 4 to 6 hours of sleep per night is actually determined to contribute to that. And then most people who suffer from nightmares experience them in the last hour of sleep before waking up. Nightmares, I mean, are they suggesting we don't know whether this person suffers from nightmares, right? So yeah, we still don't really understand what's going on there. Okay, worry about satisfying the need for sufficient sleep can make it more difficult to sleep. So maybe we're withholding information from this person so that we don't cause them to worry, because if we tell them you need to sleep more, then it's going to be harder for them to sleep. So it would actually have the opposite of the desired effect. So this would explain why, even though the patient does need more sleep, right? Because the lack of sleep, the only 4 to 6 hours per night, is determined to contribute to their condition. Even though we know they need more sleep, we're not going to tell them they need more sleep because it won't do any good, right? So I like E. Like I find E to be the most satisfying answer for that reason. Like that would explain quite well in my mind why we wouldn't advise them to sleep more. So yeah, I would go with E here. Okay. So yeah, some people, just because some people require less, doesn't mean this patient is one of them, and we would have reason to believe this patient isn't one of them. This patient requires, well, at least more than 4 to 6 per night. The nightmares thing, no idea that this patient experienced nightmares or not. And again, it's the last hour of sleep before waking. Well, that last hour would be, you know, the fourth hour if you have 4 hours, the sixth hour if you have 6 hours, the eighth hour if you have 8 hours. So how much sleep can you get before you get the nightmares? If we're trying to avoid having this person get nightmares, it's kind of a moving target. B, the first 2 hours do the most to alleviate fatigue. Okay, great, but this person it's still that 4 to 6 hours is not enough for this person, right? Yeah, the awaken from sleeping, well, they're not having trouble awakening from sleeping. Yeah, okay. E. Oh, we've got conclusion, which means that we have an argument and reasoning. So what's the argument? Explain. So we'll do another one of these. And let's see, so we'll do the last 2 questions. And then I'll stop and maybe have a nap, because apparently, unless there is some other reason that I'm yawning, it seems like I'm still pretty tired. Okay. The company that produces men's cologne, a company that produces men's cologne, had been advertising the product in general circulation magazines for several years. Then one year, the company decided to advertise its cologne exclusively in those sports magazines that with predominantly male readership. That year, the company sold fewer bottles of cologne than it had in any of the 3 immediately preceding years. So going from general circulation to just sports magazines for men, or with predominantly male readership, they sold fewer. So they targeted the people that would be using the cologne, right? Now, I was careful there not to say buying. So just because the cologne is made for men doesn't mean that men buy it for themselves. And I suspect that that would be the issue here, right? So it would make sense that they would perform better if they were targeting the people that are buying it, right? So with ads, you push ads on the people who will actually look at the ad and then spend money, right? And sometimes the ultimate end user isn't the person that's going to buy it, right? So like, I don't know, the thing that came to mind though was like children's cartoons and the commercials for children's toys. And yeah, the assumption there isn't that kids are going to buy the toys themselves. It's that kids are going to see those commercials and tell their parents or the adults in their lives who actually have the resources to buy the toys, that they that they want those toys, right? So either parents, guardians, like could be other family members, aunts, uncles, friends of the family, Santa Claus, well, right? Telling these people these are the toys that they want. But yeah, sometimes the ad actually targets, so like engagement rings, for example, the end user, quote unquote, of an engagement ring would be like typically in like heteronormative context would be a woman, but those ads are targeted at men. And yeah, I'm sure that there are inclusive engagement ring ads, but when I think about the last engagement ring ad that I saw, I think it was probably still just like directed at a man who intends to propose to a woman. Interesting. Yeah, inclusivity in advertising is kind of, yeah, it's an interesting thing because is an engagement ring like, do you market that to, like, because it's such a traditional thing, do you market it to couples that are, I'm getting completely off track. Okay, anyways, not the point. But that's sort of what I thought about here. But in any case, we can, go through these. I would think it's probably D based on the way that I prephrase that. Let's see if there's anything better. A, TV advertising is better than magazine advertising. Here we're comparing two different kinds of magazines. So bringing TV into it isn't going to help explain. B, the general circulation magazines in which the companies have placed advertisements experienced a large rise in circulation recently. Okay, so, but we're comparing how they did in sports magazines this year to how they did in general circulation previously. So this recent rise can't be part of our analysis because we're thinking about this year sports magazines versus previous years of general circulation magazines, not the recent circulation of those magazines. Most men do not wear cologne on a regular basis. That doesn't really help explain what's going on there, right? So this could be true all the time, but what about those men who do wear cologne? Where are they getting it? How are they being convinced to buy it? And if they're not being convinced to buy it, who is? It doesn't really explain the difference. So here we have women often buy cologne as gifts for male friends or relatives. So if that's the case, women are not being because the readership of the sports magazines is predominantly male, fewer women would be seeing those magazines versus when they were putting ads in general circulation magazines where the readership would be more diverse. I mean, just based on kind of what like my maybe common sense knowledge or real world knowledge, more likely you would have more women's magazines or more women buying and reading magazines than men. So yeah, I would go with D here. And then successful advertisements for men's cologne often feature well-known athletes. This would suggest that the people who are viewing those advertisements are people who care about athletes, right? And so the advertisements are successful because of the association with the athlete. That means that the person looking at it cares about the athlete. And we would think that people who purchase sports magazines care about athletes, right? So this doesn't help explain why there was a drop for athletic or sports magazines. So that one would be out as well. And D is the correct answer. Okay. Let's see. So we've got Kim's and Hampton's statements. Most strongly support the claim that they would agree with which one of the following. So it is, most strongly supported. There may be arguments here though, right? Like it may be Kim has an argument and then Hampton has a counter to that or something. Is typically what we see with these. But regardless, let's take a look at this. It does just say statements, and it is a most strongly supported question. So we'll give it a go. All right, Kim, the rapidly growing world the rapidly growing world population is increasing demand on food producers in ways that threaten our natural resources. With more land needed for both food production and urban areas, less land will be available for forests and wildlife habitats. Hampton's response: "You are overlooking the promise of technology. I am confident that improvements in agriculture will allow us to feed the world population of 10 billion predicted in 2050 without significantly increasing the percentage of the world's land now devoted to agriculture." So, okay, so more land needed for food production without significantly increasing the percentage devoted to agriculture. So they disagree on that point, but we're looking for what they agree on. Okay. Rapidly growing population. And here we have world population of 10 billion predicted for 2050. So I'm guessing they agree that the world population is going up, and that we need something to change because there's going to be an increasing demand on food producers. Now, is that increasing demand going to threaten our natural resources? This person, Hampton, says no. Okay. Because we won't need more land. So they agree that we're going to need more food. How we get that food may or may not threaten our natural resources, depending on technology, would be kind of my analysis of their perspectives, or the issue between them. Okay. A, efforts should be taken to slow the rate of human growth. No, neither of them talks about slowing the rate of human growth. B, continued research into more effective agricultural practices and innovative biotechnology aimed at producing more food on less land would be beneficial. I imagine they would probably both agree that that would be beneficial. Kim seems to think that there's a threat, and so it would be beneficial to try to avoid that threat. Hampton is more optimistic about it, and thinks that this research is going to help, and so we don't really have to be worried. But yeah, I think B, probably they would both agree with that. So I'm going to leave B. C, agricultural and wilderness areas need to be protected from urban encroachment by preparing urban areas for greater population density. They don't really deal with that, right? With the greater population in urban areas. That's not the main point at issue between them. So urban areas are like mentioned here, but yeah, Hampton doesn't address that. So we don't know what Hampton would think about that claim. D, in the next half century, human population growth will continue to erode wildlife habitats and diminish forests. So we do know, here's the other thing too, next half century, right, the next 50 years. This is an older test. This is, I don't think I even said that at the beginning. Oh, well, it'll be in the title, right? So 35. So I, guessing it was like, late 90s or early 2000s or something. And so 2050 was further away at that point in time than it is now in 2021. Okay. Anyways, yeah, but human population growth will continue to erode wildlife habitats and diminish forests. Kim would say yes. Hampton seems to think that technology can allow us to, yeah, like we won't be significantly increase the land devoted to agriculture. So, like I said, Hampton is optimistic. The human diet needs to be modified. Okay. So neither of them actually talks about modification of the human diet. So that one would be removed as well. So I think would be beneficial. Yeah, because it would help to avoid the threat, would be Kim's thinking. Hampton thinks that it will be beneficial, that it is going to happen and it will be beneficial. So definitely agrees. So I'd go with B. Okay. Well, I'm going to go take a nap. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Yeah. Happy LSAT prep. Have a good one. Bye.